With our next generation submarine fleet switching to nuclear, security surrounding South Australia is now an issue. In addition, China has said it'll be watching the project very closely, which should make us all wonder why we don't shut down the huge Chinese consulate in Adelaide. Surely it is just 30 minutes from where our shipbuilding program occurs. My next guest thinks it's time to act. Lincoln Parker is chair of the Liberal Party's Defence and National Security Policy branch. He joins me now. Lincoln, when the consulate opened last year, there were all sorts of protests about its existence in Adelaide. The argument has changed in the space of 24 hours, hasn't it?
Well, it absolutely has, Chris. And what we saw was after 2016, when the Australian government announced its massive $120 billion shipbuilding program in Adelaide, and now that is a whole lot more, we saw China wanting to open a very large consulate in Adelaide. Now, the site itself is about 6,000 square metres, and for the Americans in our audience, that's about 50,000 square feet. So it's really large. And to put that into some context, neither the United States or the United Kingdom have a consulate in Adelaide, and there are only two other countries that have representation in Adelaide, and that is Greece and Italy, who have between 1 and 2 staff. Now we see we've just... Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, I think that's hilarious. They're building the Taj Mahal for the Chinese consulate. Don't tell me they're not spying. And yet the Italians and the Greeks have 2 staff?
That's exactly right, Chris. And we know that they have between 10 and 15 people in that particular spy base. I mean, let's call it for what it is. It's a spy base. It's not really a consulate if you look at the definition of a consulate. Now, not only does that spy base enable 10 to 15 spies to be able to go out into the community, to the restaurants, and gather intelligence and then transmit intelligence back to China. But it also enables all of the other spies from China that are operating across Australia and indeed across South Australia to use that as a conduit and a base for themselves, even though they may not be attached to that particular consulate itself. Now, we understand that Adelaide is not a very large city. It is a very strategically important city. We've got a very large test base there at Woomera, where we do a lot of sensitive technology testing. Of course, we've got ASC and we've got Osborne, where we're going to be building the most sensitive military technology that this country has ever seen. The United States has only ever shared its nuclear propulsion technology with one other country before, and that is the United Kingdom, and they're going to do that with us now. We could be putting that at risk with a very large spy base 30 minutes down the road from Osborne. And I would also say that the Department of Defence has a presence there not far from Adelaide, with the Defence Science and Technology Group operating there. So it is a very strategic, military important spot for Australia, and yet it's a very small city. So why is China there? Why do they have such a huge presence compared to nobody else? And why are we enabling this? Now, don't forget, there's also precedent, Chris. The United States in 2020 shut down the Chinese consulate in Houston. Now, they did that for the exact same reason. Now, there's not a huge amount of military technology going on in Houston. I mean, it's just they were very concerned and had evidence of theft from IP across the oil and gas sector and the medtech sector. Now, this is much more important to Australia's sovereignty, and it's something that we need to look at shutting down, or at least having a look at more closely.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's an absolute no-brainer. Just on the technology we're about to be privy to, we should not underestimate what they have decided to do and share that secret technological intelligence. We shouldn't underestimate that.
It is absolutely momentous, Chris. I think this AUKUS, the Australia, United Kingdom, United States trilateral security partnership that has just been signed by President Biden, UK Prime Minister Johnson and Prime Minister Scott Morrison, is the single most important military partnership that our country has ever signed before, far more important than ANZUS, because we are in a much more dangerous space than we've ever been before in the history of our country.
Correct.
We know what China's doing. They're saying it quite outright. They are being very aggressive. through their mouthpiece at the Global Times, they've already threatened to nuke Japan. They've got daily incursions into Taiwan's air defence identification zone. They're openly saying that they're going to invade Taiwan. Now, it might be for another show, but just how important Taiwan is to Australia. We're living in times where we really must start taking the defence and security and sovereignty of our nation really seriously.
Exactly.
I think this government is doing it, and hats off to Scott Morrison and indeed to Peter Dutton, who's at the Pentagon as we speak.